Oh my gosh. Oh, hello, world. Hey, welcome back to Comic Book News or whatever we call this show. I'm your old pal, Dan Shaheen. It's been a while since I've had an interview here live and in studio, but what an interview we've got today. We've got the return of one of my all time favorite indie artists in the universe of all time, Mr. Eddie Campbell. So let's not keep him waiting. Unfortunately, though, a little bit of show news first. I couldn't quite get this hooked up the way it normally is. So some of the people that I really wanted to see this the most might not be watching this right now, but that's okay. If you got questions for Eddie, bring them up in the chat, and if we have a chance, we'll get to them. But more importantly, if you want to see your comics on this show, on the $1 Million Comics Cam, there is one place you can send them: to the $1 Million Mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. Don't be a dummy. Send them in today. I want to see them. I want to spread them out on the $1 Million Comics Cam and check them out with my pal Larry. So without further ado, though, let's go and talk to today's guest. But we can't do it right here, can we?
To the bat poles.
All right, back in the Bat Cave where I'm comfy and it's moist in here. It's a little humid in the Bat Cave, but what are you going to do? Let's bring in today's guest and talk to him about the minutia of his life and also the larger picture. Something that his work sort of has an amazing way of capturing both ends of. I don't know if that makes any sense. Let's see if he understands what I mean. Let's bring in Eddie Campbell right now. Hey, Eddie, welcome back.
Lovely to see you again, Dan.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to have you here. I just finished reading your brand new book, the Second Fake Death of Eddie Campbell. And it came as a sort of flip book bound back to back with a new printing of The Fate of the Artist, this is basically a sequel to, so it makes a really nice package. I didn't get the physical copy that I sent. Amazon messed up and could not send them to me. It's what I get for not going to my local bookstore, I guess. But Eddie was kind enough to send me a PDF. I read it. We'll talk about it and look at it. So I'm going to get that up on screen. But while I do that, Eddie, why don't you tell us what's going on? What's this book all about?
This is the second fake death, because I'm a glutton for punishment. I like to see myself. It's my big apology to the world for being Eddie Campbell. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for imposing myself on the world.
Well,
so this book contains my ritual humiliation.
Well, I love it. It's such a mixture of interesting things that are so Eddie Campbell. So like there's a mixture of really old-fashioned, old-timey comics and an appreciation of those and a dissection and even a attempt to recreate them yourself. But then also you're kind of on the bleeding edge of newfangled computerized art techniques that have really changed the way that you make comics.
Yes, everything's got simpler. I used to have the big desktop computer and the scanner and the printer and everything. And what I'm doing now is I'm working on my laptop, and I'm drawing everything using the touchpad.
Okay, I want to just point out this is one of the first major panels of the work, and it's beautiful, and it's a really cool image. It's mixed media, I guess is what you would call this. I don't know what else you call it. You're blending though your hand-drawn work and photography in a really interesting way. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach to that?
I've always been interested in that as an idea. I'm not saying I've pursued it in my work, but the idea has always interested me that that the tension between the drawn figure and the photograph. Way back in the 60s, I remember there was an issue of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., where Steranko, he put a large photo of Times Square behind these characters. There was Nick and Dum Dum and Laura were stepping out of the picture towards the reader with Times Square fully lit in the background. It was quite striking. I remember as a kid thinking, that's an interesting thing to do, having his characters walking around inside a photograph. Just the conflict of two different pictorial idioms, the drawn and the photographed, interested me. So I decided to lead off with a similar picture here myself. The perspective in this is actually quite complicated because there's actually 6 different photos of the same location, which I drew it to begin with. Then I had to stitch the photos together to match what I had drawn. And there are joins, but the joins are all behind the 2 figures, so that you can't. If I were to remove the 2 figures, you'd see where the photographs join.
Oh, wow.
Well, or they fail to join exactly. But I've hidden it there behind the figures.
And then you're doing the one other thing, I think. What's going on with the shadows there? In the sense that are you trying to add like the volumetric shadow of the figure to the background?
It's yeah. And I've drawn a bit in the foreground as well, but it's enough. It's enough.
It is enough. It's more than, I mean, it's not more than enough. It's just enough, I guess is what I should say.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've always liked a drawing to have a certain brevity. A drawing to me should never be too exact, too precise. It should always have a hand-drawn dynamic about it. So that's what I mean about the conflict. Is the conflict between the rigidly photographic and the hand-drawn.
I think there is maybe like a disassociate. There's something going on here that makes it feel like just like heightened reality, and it's really paying off. It's really difficult for me to describe the effect it has when you're reading it, but you feel like, oh, this is totally real. It's real life, but then it absolutely is not at the same time. It'll just make a left turn, and I find those turns quite enjoyable. So tell me a little bit about, you said you're doing it on a computer, you're using a tablet. What's your setup? What's your software?
I'm just using the finger pad at the front.
Yeah.
My laptop.
The trackpad?
Yeah, the trackpad. What did I call it? Yeah, the
finger pad.
I don't even know what it's called. The touchpad, I meant to say. I'm just using the touchpad there. I like the idea. I've got the most lightweight computer possible. I can carry it in a briefcase without feeling the weight. It's lighter than a graphic novel. And I can take it anywhere. I can sit outside, and I can sit out in the sun, sit in the garden, I can sit in the park, and work. I'm not chained to an office. You know, we always wanted to be artists so that we wouldn't have to work in an office. But most of us, we've construed it so that we're chained to an office desk surrounded by equipment.
Well, by the way,
an artist should be free to wander around in the world. He should be able to draw on the train or take it on an aeroplane with him and continue his work. That's my theory, anyway.
I just like I said, I read Fate of the Artist immediately after reading this just now, just like an hour ago. And I loved, is that a real O. Henry short story about the
every word in that 7-page story is from O. Henry. I took a few out to make it fit 7 pages. I took out the he said and the she said and a couple of other little bits of redundancy. But otherwise, those are the words of O. Henry.
Okay.
O. Henry is a beautiful writer. He has a wonderful turn of phrase and a way of moving swiftly from one idea to another. I think he's greatly undervalued as a writer. He's mostly thought of for his twist endings,
yes,
which are all right, but he's a great writer of prose.
And just the darkness of it, of the idea that this funny guy got so ground down by his life as a professional humorist that like he took solace in the life of an undertaker, and that's what just freed him up to be the most complete human in the end. I really liked it.
Yeah. I also thought it'd be a rather kind of astonishing way to finish a graphic novel was by stealing somebody else's short story.
Well played, sir, because it really did play in. It captured so well.
It summed up everything
themes
that was happening in the book.
So let's talk about, speaking of things happening in the book, let's cut back to second fake death of Eddie Campbell and just talk about, like, this is a pandemic. This book takes place during the pandemic. I maybe the majority, if not, probably the majority of the book deals quite a bit tangentially with pandemic stuff.
And everybody's wearing a mask. There are some pages here which are basically just two masks talking to each other, and the only human part of it is the eyes above the mask. I thought it'd be an interesting challenge to give myself to capture actual people just by their eyes, so the top halves of their faces.
Which is kind of how we all lived, right, for a couple of years there.
Yeah, and another thing I noticed here is, remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we thought there was a novelty of wearing masks, and we got hold of interesting masks, and we were exchanging masks. Look, I got these really interesting ones with this design on them. Have one of mine. And after a couple of years, we get so bored with it, we just wear the medical masks now. We just wear those blue medical masks. We all got the same one. But it was one of the running themes in here that I would try to represent everybody's personality with the mask that they've picked.
Well, it's been my theory since the pandemic, since we've come out of lockdown, that, like, one of the most traumatic things you can do to a person is put them, like, in solitary confinement and take away human interaction. And, like, we did that on a global scale, just for a very extended period of time. And I feel like we got humongous, like, psychic wounds out of it, like, across the world from that.
Yes. On that theme, when we finally get out of the house, scoot along to the car chase.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about the car chases and stuff too.
The car chase. I actually, we finally got out there. Yeah, scoot along to the car chase.
Yeah, I will. Okay. Oh well, yeah, okay. Although I will say, I love the Rarebit Fiend.
The dreams. So yeah, the idea of being trapped alone with your dreams. I've got this recurring dream idea in here. But when we finally got out of the house, we get involved in a car. We get involved in a situation. Oh, it must be further along. I forgot.
Yeah, it is. I'll just keep going through the pages. If you just want, you can talk about whatever you want, and if you see anything interesting that you want to talk about specific stuff.
First time we went out of the house, we get involved. Our poor little taxi driver get involved in an altercation with Karen, because this is another character of the last few years, is the ubiquitous Karen. And we had this Karen in the car next to us screaming at our poor little fellow. And
there she is.
There she is. Yes, Karen. It ended up with a car chase I've never been in a car chase in my life before. I've never drawn one, even as a fiction. And here we were.
And so that was totally real.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That chase. So there's these several strip formats and ideas that you keep coming back to. A little less text heavy than Fate of the Artist, although there's still big text sections. What's the difference in approach there?
Well, this is why I thought of it as a follow-up to The Fate of the Artist, which was described by one critic as a what was he calling it? The tiny fragments method of composition. The Fate of the Artist is made up of lots of small parts that refer to each other in oblique ways. Sometimes, there we go. The one on there. I've got two masks talking to each other for a whole page. I've got my wife Audrey wearing a cat mask. I thought that would be her mask of choice. I've got this fictional detective named Royler Boom, who has his name emblazoned upon his mask. Boom.
And that name was chosen for its dramatic effect, right? To tell you the spoonerism.
The spoonerism, yes. Americans don't seem to get the spoonerisms as instantly as English do. So it's a twist on Boiler Room.
Right, sure. I'm a big fan of that stuff. I'm also a big fan of like where your style's going. So you're telling me when you do a panel, like let's just say this.
Yeah.
How much of it photo reference, using a photo with a layer on top of it and drawing over it?
I had a photo beside me when I did
that. That one looks photo reference to some degree, maybe the angle of the glasses or something.
There are two or three that are quite specifically photo referenced, and because inevitably in drawing a comic, you don't have you've got two photos to work with, and they fit two. If you're lucky, they fit two of the poses in your story, and the rest. A comic artist has got to be able to take in a couple of photos of the same person and then be able to reproduce it from lots of different angles and distances. Once or twice I found myself working with design guys who are not able to do that. That's a comic book skill, is being able to look closely at a figure, at a face, and be able to put that face through a whole load of variations.
Very interesting. When you say design guy, what do you mean by that?
I once met, back in the 90s, a guy called Pete Mullins used to work with me. He was my regular art assistant. There was a couple of weeks where he disappeared. He left. He left for a couple of weeks for a honeymoon. He got married, and I had so much work on. I had to hire somebody else quickly for a couple of weeks. He was an illustrator guy, and the first page it said, "Look, we need a California motel just in the background there." And he said, "Well, what photos have we got?" And this was in the mid '90s. We didn't have Google. We couldn't just get things so quickly as we can now. And I said, "I don't have one. We just got to wing it." We got to wing it. And he'd never been asked to do this before. It was very strange to have to. I had to sketch out the. I didn't have one handy either. I had to sketch out one from memory.
Well, I want to say so these 3 pages here, which it's talking heads. That's what it is, but it's very difficult to. This was an engaging sequence of 3 pages that read very quickly and felt great. It's difficult for me to explain how in the hands of a really good cartoonist, sort of a boring scene like this flows effortlessly, whereas in lesser hands it would be clunky and tough to read.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a boring scene, of course. But dispel that notion from your head. There's no such thing as a boring scene. every scene is a different challenge. Here, the dialogue is quite lively. There's a lively badinage going on here, a repartee that's quite funny. So the art demanded to not be too distracting. It really just had to be the two characters talking with,
I mean,
in such a way the reader can imagine himself a third character in the room.
Yeah, and I mean, all of the black lines, outline lines, are only in the figure work, right? There's no lines. These are just like planes of color behind.
I only put this is something I was talking about in my last interview. I don't draw a line. I don't make a line drawing and then fill it in. I paint with colors, and then I may decide at the end that it needs the strength of an outline just to finish it. So the outline is the last thing to go in.
Wow.
Like, is there? I'm not even sure. In that close-up side view of Audrey there, I don't think there's even a line around the face. Yeah, there's no line there.
But just on the chin only. Yeah.
I decided that one didn't need a line. So the line is the last thing that goes on the picture in my world.
Very interesting. Very different than I'm sure the way most cartoonists are working or thinking about the page.
Yeah, to me, it's not a drawing. I always feel that I'm painting. Even when I'm using the computer, I'm painting with color.
Okay. Well, you go into a couple of different styles. You have a couple of different tropes and like strip formats that you bring together. Part of this is sort of described in the narrative as like you had some ideas and aborted attempts at books.
The conceit here is that because of lockdown, that the Eddie Campbell, the artist, is struggling to create things, which he wasn't really, but the fiction is here is that he keeps coming up with new ideas and he's dissatisfied with them. So that one of the ideas is drawing his dreams, and there's a couple of politically styled things in there. You were fastening on one earlier, and finally there's this one about the detective Roy LeBoom, and the fiction is that Eddie Campbell's wife Audrey suspects that she's married to an imposter.
Yes.
And she goes to see this private detective who she employs to get to the bottom of the mystery, to find out who. And of course, the real Audrey says in the book, she said, "Why do I care if you're an imposter? I'm happy enough with you. I'm not invested in Clan Campbell. I don't care if you're a real one or not."
Right. Well, I do want to point out too on this page, cameo by someone who has been a guest on this show,
Dennis
Kitchen. You say all you say is Mr. Oh, you say Mr. Kitchen. I don't know if you ever spell out this is Dennis Kitchen. You say he's a publisher.
Yeah,
I knew it because I've interviewed him, and of course I'm a comics dork. What a great guy Dennis Kitchen is, right? Like
he's wonderful. Yes,
amazing fella. I have to write back to him because he's promised to investigate for me. He's promised to reach out to Robert Crumb and ask whether Disney got his permission to put Mr. Natural in the new Chip and Dale movie that came out during the pandemic. Right. Very, very, very curious about that. And I might be the only one who's really curious about it. Also, I said, hey, when I talked to him, I said, "Hey, Dennis, how much did you like Basil Wolverton as a kid?" And he said, "You got me. My style is described as the bastard son of Bushmiller and Wolverton."
Wolverton, yeah, there's Bushmiller.
Yeah, what an amazing guy, and it's cool that you work these cameos in. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. Speaking of which, you've been in, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you yourself have been a cameo character in Rick Veitch's Rare Bit Fiends book.
Yes,
I'm pretty sure. Are you friends with Rick?
Yeah, I haven't talked to Rick since the 90s, over 20 years ago. But yeah, Rick was publishing his self-published book at the same time as I was, his Rarebit Fiend.
Well, he's back to self-publishing, by the way. He's putting out brand new stuff, publishing it himself through print on demand on Amazon. Putting out really great stuff, finishing some of his works from that time, including new Rarebit Fiends stuff. So obviously I thought about that when I saw this book, but I just want to know if you were a fan of that book. That's one of my all-time favorite works about dreams, let alone comic works about dreams.
Yeah, it was an interesting project to record these dreams accurately and dispassionately.
It was sort of his first step to try and get towards lucid dreaming, which he says that he's gotten to.
Yeah.
I
find dreams are terrifying. I'm always so glad when I've woken up. I wake up in a sweat. You've got to get up and walk around, otherwise you find yourself going back to the same dream. You've got to break it by going to the bathroom or something.
Well, it's funny you say that because there's quite a dreamlike quality to your work. I think the way that I tried to describe earlier, it's hard for me to describe the way it dips into like the mundane and the real, and then segues, sort of makes left turns immediately into like the fantastic and unreal. Do you have a strategy around that, or is that just sort of like how you think about things?
I never thought about it, but
my favorite use of the C word this year, by the way. Thank you.
But my work does go from one mode or idiom to another within itself.
Yes.
There's some big fruit humor in here, and sequences which like this, which are almost photorealistic.
Yeah, it's just how often have you done car chases before?
I've never done a car chase.
Never
done a car chase in my life.
I find stuff like pictures like this really interesting, where you're mixing in, obvious photographs with stuff that's less obviously photographed, but maybe photographs.
Yeah, that car at the top is not a photograph, but the hubcaps are.
The plant is. The fence is not.
The plant is. Yeah, it's all mixed up.
I love it.
Those trash cans in the back are photographed, I think, but the car isn't, because I don't know what car that is. I've mixed up 2 or 3 different makes and models in this one car here. That I have no idea what it is, because there's more than one thing there. And when I realized there were more than one thing, I had to rationalize it and make them all look like they were the same. They were the same car. I get carried away stealing cars from different places before I thought to myself, wait a minute, they should all at least be the same model.
I mean, you've been doing this kind of thing since before digital was a thing. Like, so for your fans, you bringing in photography and mixing it up, that's just Eddie Campbell, right? I don't think it's a stretch for any of them, or like a shock.
I did that in Bacchus quite a few times.
Soma, a lot, yeah, quite a bit. And I love the evolution. One of the things, though, I'm not sure if I miss or not, I really love your hand lettering style. You've got one of the most recognizable styles. Like, you're almost like an Alex Toth in that, like, I see your letters and I know it's you.
And on this book, I've abandoned in The Fate of the Artist.
Yes,
it's hand lettered, and in this one, I've abandoned it. And there was the review on the Comics Journal. The only thing they had to talk about was why is Eddie abandoned hand lettering? And it seems to me at this stage of having evolved into doing the whole thing on this laptop with the touchpad, that to have done the lettering by hand would be like importing faux antiques. It doesn't belong here. It doesn't belong in this. The hand lettering doesn't belong in this setting.
You feel like it would be out of place in it with your new style and your new approach, or your
This style,
evolved style, this style.
this style. I'll have a different style next time you talk to me.
Got it.
Yes, it wouldn't be right here. It would. The thing about hand lettering, I'll say something about that. The thing about hand lettering is that it is aware of its environment. Good hand lettering is aware of being on the page. It's aware of everything around it on the page. It indicates a consciousness. Obviously, lettering doesn't have a consciousness, but yeah, the letterer does while he's doing it. And this lettering is aware of where it is and what's around it. If you're just going to make a font out of your hand lettering, I don't understand the point of that.
That's my next question for you.
If I'm going to use a font, I'm going to use one of the classic typefaces. I'd rather use one of the classic typefaces than use my stupid thing. Given that a font of my lettering is not going to be aware of itself on the page, it's going to be a regulated thing. There will be repetitions in it. It will be machine made, even if it is based on.
I mean, it's for clarity, right? Like, I mean, that's why you choose a serif font or whatever. Like,
but if you used your own font as a made up typeface, that's cosmetic. To me, that doesn't mean anything. So if I'm going to use a font, I'd rather get a good one. I'd rather get Baskerville or Caslon or something, or Bimbo.
I'm thinking back to your hand lettering though, and I'm trying to remember. You use, for the most part, mixed case even in your hand lettering, don't you? Or do you do all caps? I can't.
I used all caps at the beginning, and then I thought, if I'm going to all this trouble to repudiate everything comic book, why am I still using all? Like on the first Alec book, which is like 130 pages, is all caps all the way through. And I thought, so then on my next book, I abandoned that, and I did a sentence case, mixed case lettering, as I'm doing here, and the one you've got on screen. Yeah, it's when I see that all cap things, we accept it because we've wasted our lives reading comics. We've squandered our time on Earth reading comic books. So that looks right to us. It looks natural, but my mother was once looking over my shoulder at a comic I was reading, and she said, "Why is it all in capitals?" The first thing she noticed was that it was all in capitals. And I didn't know why. I had no idea. I was a kid. I had no idea. I didn't know anything.
I think that was a big part of its comic status as subliterate. Like, even if you could get somebody to look at it and try and read it, they would just, like, somebody who's used to reading, literature is going to look at that and be like, this is for babies. And just no matter what the words are being said. Now, here's another cameo of a guy. This time I don't know this guy.
Landis Blair. He's another magnificent fellow. His work is glorious. There's an example of his drawing there.
Great stuff.
And there's drawings on the wall behind him. I think this is a version where I've lined the drawings up.
And this is a pal of yours that you hang out with and you drink with.
He's a young fellow. He did a graphic novel. He drew a graphic novel titled "The Hunting Accident," and he's got a kids' book out at the moment titled "The Night Tent."
Well, I really liked him. I thought he was a cool character, and then you creep me out. Like, what is going on here, and why am I so creeped out? Like, something about a close up on the mesh mask and the religious quote. Like, what's going on here?
It's supposed to be a cross-hatched mask. It didn't occur to me you might read it as mesh until this minute. He's an obsessive cross-hatcher. He shows video on his Twitter channel of him cross-hatching.
think it's just his well-defined lips behind the mask, combined with this quote and the weird cropping of his face. There's Eddie, tell what's going on. You're telling us something about this guy with this panel.
No, accidentally.
Okay, fair enough. I believe you. Do you know Craig Yo, by the way?
Yes.
Yo. And I think the only reason you didn't have him in your book then is because like no one would be able to tell you apart because you both have got that look going on. Okay, tell me about COVID-19. Let's go back to COVID for just a second and talk about.
That was just a throwaway idea that I needed some reference to the larger world of COVID that was going on. So I've got a little COVID character there. You can see him in his tuxedo with his COVID head.
Yeah.
Yes, the book needed just a hint at what the larger context was outside of the walls. Inside this house, there's two individuals, but what's going on? So I had to, and the political madness. The vaccine makes spoons stick to your skin.
This one I keep up on this stuff. That one I never even heard of.
Yeah. She was in the Midwest somewhere. I can't. She was a doctor, I think, but she's lately been disavowed. They finally realised she's an idiot about this business with spoons sticking to her. And
I gotta look that up.
For sure. They were sticking spoons to their foreheads on the television to show. So why did you miss this?
Man, I follow that kind of business pretty closely too. One thing I don't.
Another one is the vaccine contains some minuscule thing that will be activated when we all switch to 5G.
Right.
We'll activate this, and we become walking zombies going around eating each other's flesh, and only those will be saved who have avoided the vaccine.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And they will be going around like the living people in The Walking Dead, shooting zombies for sport. This is one of the great fantasies of the right.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
You haven't heard of that one either?
No, those I heard about the 5G stuff for sure. It's just the spoons bit that I got, because that's a tasty little morsel. I'm really glad that you brought that in here. One thing that you don't talk about though, you don't really dive too much into politically. I take it from the book that you're pro-vaccine, for whatever that means. I'm vaccinated as well. Who cares? But like, I believe it's a personal choice for people to do based on their particular health situation or what have you. But you sort of avoided that, and you don't really even talk anything about like the conspiracy, like lab leak conspiracy or any of that kind of stuff. Any thoughts on that stuff at all?
No, I've got no thoughts at all.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that when I drew this sequence that you've still got up here with the zombies, it lurched so far into the insane that I can only draw it with an insane an insane style. I can only draw it the way a demented mental patient would draw. I thought that was the only thing that could be done with it.
I mean, the only thing that
you can't draw that realistically. It's so stupid.
Well, the thing is, people willing to cling to these kind of theories that are patently absurd on the face of it. To me, it speaks a lot to just the general distrust that is just growing and growing and growing. People just don't trust authority of any type, or they do less and less and less. That's what I think at the root of this stuff.
Well, I don't know. It's we get millions, squillions of people who don't trust what medical science says, but they trust Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's
everything that Donald Trump says is perfect.
yeah, that's a whole other thing. How wild? Okay, so how you brought him up? How wild is it that we've got a guy who is really running for president so that he can pardon himself, and he's got a shot at it? Like, this is a real thing that's happening in this country right now.
It's never happened before. He's just been indicted for the fourth time, which will date this. You know, people will look back and go, oh, fourth time, yeah, that's late mid-August. But yeah,
I don't know if it opens up an era where that's like going to be normal. Like every president is going to get like politically somehow shanghaied.
Totally insane. What are we to do? There's nothing to be done about it.
Okay, let's talk about things we can do something about. Comics. Let's talk about Chris Ware for a second, because that's a guy I really want to talk to. I reviewed Rusty Brown a year or so ago, and I got a lot of great response to that review. And I don't know, I would love to. I've been a fan of his since I was a kid, and probably around the same time I became a fan of yours in the 90s.
Yes, Chris is one of the greats. He put 2 years ago. He put on this 2 years. I think it's 2 years ago now. Time is all time has become a smear.
Yeah, totally.
There are no features or landmarks in time now. It's all just a smudge. But I think it was 2 years ago. He did this exhibition, which rather than reproduce it, going back to that big photo, rather than try to draw that, I thought I'm just going to get the lobby of this. I'm just going to get a photo of the lobby of this magnificent building. What is it?
It works perfectly. It works really well. It made me. Sorry, go ahead.
It's the Art Institute or whatever it is in Chicago here. I've only been there the once to see this show.
It was this kind of stuff that made me wonder, have you ever dabbled in 3D digital art and combining it in 3D modeling or that kind of thing?
No, I'm no good at 3D.
That's kind of a passion of mine. Okay, and then sorry.
But the highlight of the show was it was an old comic here, which you can see examples of it at the top, about these two ladies named Lucy and Sophie. That's the title. Lucy and Sophie say goodbye. They in every example of the strip, they're so busy saying goodbye that they don't see chaos happening around them. In the top instance there on the left, there's a
tornado.
Tornado coming up in the background, taking all the buildings away with it. And in the one on the right, there's a messenger's trying to deliver them what do you call it? A gram. What's the name?
Telegram.
A telegram. I forgot the word telegram. And they're so busy saying hello, and they always kiss, and they fully embrace and everything. He actually turns to an old man while he's standing there. But he was completely anonymous. Nobody knows who this artist is.
And was that controversial? Was that just an anachronism that was something that was just accepted in common at the time this was done, or was this transgressive in some way?
There's been a bit of an effort to find sexual transgression in it.
Yeah.
But I think women in history have just been more physically,
I think so too,
friendly with each other than men permit themselves to be. All that's changing, of course. All this gender stuff is all changing how things are done. But this story is how I decided that I was going to solve the problem of who this mysterious artist was. And over that weekend, I think we went there on a Friday, and over the next 2 days, I solved the problem of who they are.
And you feel like you got to it.
Yeah. I got loads of comparisons and examples to show how it's done, but we couldn't there wasn't room to put them all in the story here. But the problem was we couldn't read his signature. His signature was unintelligible, and I got my pal at Barnacle Press. I got him to see. There's a comparison.
I love this part.
these two gloves, they're by the same artist. One is by an illustrator in another part of the paper, the magazine section, who signed his work all the time. He's the artist who drew Lucy and Sophie, and he never signed that. He never once signed it. That's why it's a mystery.
This was a great thing for me to hear about the formulas, the hand formulas, and how you can use that to identify. I've never heard that before. Makes perfect sense. I can't wait to try it.
It's one of those things. It's a complicated biological object, the hand.
Yeah.
And most artists very early on find a shorthand way of rendering the hand, like this chap here. It's the spaces between the fingers on the drawing there that show it to be the same artist, which is an interest. He's drawing the spaces rather than
Yes.
Which is an unusual thing to do, which clearly indicates we've got the same artist here. The problem, as you can see by the bit on the right, is that his signature was illegible. So I had to get Barnacle Press in to help me.
I love this whole sequence.
And then it becomes, how do you draw something that's it's entirely happening over the internet? So if you scoot down a little bit, this is him. So once I introduced him, I just used his avatar,
So great.
The old-time cartoonist Everett through, and I'll just animate him in the panels. But don't go any further, you'll give away the end of the story.
Okay. So great. Yeah.
The end of the story is a surprise, unless you were with us because we did it all live on Twitter 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So anybody who was following it then knows the end of the story.
I loved your dissection of the signature and the loops and all this stuff that you got into. Like, to me, I love technical stuff and I love comics and I love when they come together like this. Also, very interesting. Just putting this together now, and a topic I wanted to touch on for a second to see what you think about AI generative art. And it just occurred to me, like, that's what you just said about hands being so hard to draw and how many people mess it up. Explains to me why so many of those AI pictures that the fingers are always wrong. That's like one of the ways that you can tell that they're not.
They have a hard
time generated.
They have a hard time. Yeah, that's an interesting observation, given what we were just saying about hands.
That's what I mean. I never put that together before.
But yeah, the AI is having a hell of a job registering the structure of hands. Half the time it would put 7 fingers on it. It's having a hard time reading what a hand is and what a hand's supposed to look like.
I'm just wondering if that's because there are so many wrongly drawn hands, even in a lot of great pictures. Like, the hands are one of the more difficult things, as I understand, to draw and draw correctly.
Well, in they have more complexity in what 10 square. How big's a hand? I don't know, 10 inches squared or whatever. But they have more complexity in that 10 inches. Is it that much? 8 inches squared, whatever it is, in that small space than any other part of the visible body.
True. And then when you think about it, the brain, if it's our brain in their hands, that's everything, that's humanity. It's all, it's absolutely. So this was fascinating. I'll breeze past this quickly. We don't give it away, but I loved the signature stuff, just the zooming in on signatures and stuff and talking about something so technical like that. It reminded me of in Fate of the Artist too. You go back, you talk about what were the other stuff that you talk about in Fate of the Artist that's of a similar ilk, where you're dissecting. Maybe I'll pull that one up in a minute.
Pass that one by before I read it.
Yeah. We don't want to give that away.
These little things. These little things here that you've got on the screen now. These are actual little illustrations from the San Francisco Examiner, 1896.
But not the caption here.
Oh, the original caption was, "Your husband is writing a novel." I stuck in.
Did a good job on that. It matches pretty good.
Just to be mischievous. Yeah. I stuck that in just by
pretty good
cloning the letters. Oh, and there's the dream in which I
Chris Ware cameo.
sorely abused poor Chris Ware. It was a dream.
I love this format. I love the lettering, the nods to Winsor McCay without you having to have a kid running around on a bed or something like that. It's just like it's obvious but not obvious. If you don't know Winsor McCay very well, it wouldn't be obvious, but if you do, it's impossible to miss. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in Eddie Campbell, the digital evolution of Eddie Campbell that we see in this book. And do you see that slow? Have you got feedback from people? They don't like it, like the fonts. We want to get back to the hand lettering, stuff like that. You get a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm getting them, and getting that, and I shouldn't be drawing photographs. I should be drawing it instead of just sticking a photograph in. But I actually made a joke about photograph. At the beginning, this is why she thinks her husband's an imposter, because he's just using photographs instead of drawing.
I thought it was great that it was because during that time everyone wore masks. Like that was the ideal time for you to switch out.
If you were going to be an imposter, the world couldn't better serve your skullduggery than at this very minute.
Okay, I will say this, Eddie. Your style, I mean, is it faster for you? It's got to be faster for you than your old process.
Only insofar as I say I can take it everywhere with me.
Yeah.
I don't get an idea and then have to wait till I get back to the computer. Yeah. I take the computer everywhere with me, and I can sit down in a cafe. I've got the Photoshop on the computer. I can do everything on my computer, on my little laptop. And it's a little MacBook Air, so it's the lightest lightest possible laptop.
So do you subscribe to, let me add, Adobe Creative Suite?
Yeah.
Have you tried the generative AI fill and erase features at all? Pretty interesting.
I'll give it a look.
I think you should. You got to download the beta of Photoshop to do it, but I did it and I was pretty shocked by what it would let you do. For somebody like you who wants to collage different things together the way that you do, I think you could do interesting things with it. But let me just ask you, we touched on AI. Just ethically, just what are your feelings about it in general? I know how most artists I've talked to
about AI.
Yeah,
I can understand. I can understand why people are upset about it, but I've not got involved in the business of being upset. I think if your work is that you have a style, then why did you settle for just having a style? If I had a student, I would never dare say it to my fellow artists. But if somebody came to me and said, asked for advice, I'd say, well, why have you got a style? Get me, grow out of that habit. The whole world is your oyster. Like for instance, when I used to read the comics, there came a point where I lost interest in John Buscema, because he had such a style that he had 6 figure poses, and he always drew one of those poses.
Yeah.
Or he had 6 facial expressions.
Yeah.
And I was recently, like Neil Adams died recently, and I went back and looked at some recent stuff he did. I thought I hadn't given Neil Adams a thought since the 1970s. Not a thought. But I went back and looked, and I thought, I'm so disappointed, because he looked exactly the way he looked in the 1970s. I thought, that Batman that he did not so long ago, I thought, what? Why?
Not to mention being batshit crazy if you actually read it. It is banana cakes.
Well, that may have made it interesting. Maybe maybe that would have interested me, but he's drawing these same poses. He's got the same faces. And he's drawn the same character that he drew in the 1970s. Right? He's a grown-ass man. Why isn't he doing something else with his life?
Rest in peace. Rest in peace, Neil.
The same thing he was doing 50 years ago.
I was disappointed by that later, Neil Adams, where I did some reviews of it and stuff where I talked about it, and I just said, Neil, we want to see you draw. It's obvious you still can draw, but I wished he had teamed up with a really good writer and put out something to get like that as a final work instead of that crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, man, Neil, I mean, come on. Who is more influential? Like people talk about Jack Kirby all the time, and I go, yeah, obviously Neil himself influenced by Kirby. But I go, when I look at the broader modern style, at least that I grew up with, especially in the 90s, the broader comic book mainstream style, I go, they're all sons of Neil.
Yeah. Yeah.
More so than Jack Kirby, in my opinion. It's their third generation Kirby clones or fourth generation Kirby clones, but like first or second generation Neil Adams clones.
Yeah.
Loved this picture specifically. I don't know why, but I thought, I go, man, Eddie can draw. This is photo on drawing on top of photo. What's going on here?
No. Just looking in the mirror.
Oh, it's great. That one popped out at me for sure.
There are 4 or 5. I said to you, I just estimate. There are 4 or 5 different versions of that head underneath, and they all look completely different. I really worked hard to make that face riveting.
And this wacky ending, kind of in the Hollywood Hills, I don't know why it makes me think of like Mad World or something for whatever reason. It's just like the screwball ending. I really liked it.
Yes.
Good stuff. It was it's a satisfying ending to the book.
The whole thing, even though at first it looks like a grab bag of bits and pieces, it's the most thoroughly worked out plot that I have drawn since one of the Bacchus volumes, maybe.
It's cohesive for sure. It makes total sense, yet makes no sense at the same time. It's that mixture of the mundane and the absurd. To me, that's Eddie Campbell in a nutshell. Like,
and you're back where you started. If you zoom in on there on the face of death.
Yeah.
The face of death. Death's wearing a flesh mask.
Oh man, I didn't see that.
The Grim Reaper is a lady, and she's wearing a flesh mask.
I don't know if you remember our last interview. At the end, for some reason, I picked to play a quote by Robert Oppenheimer. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, it was a weird quote. It was really weird that I chose that. And I just thought it was weird that we're back talking again right after that movie is out. Such a big hit. I don't know why I thought of that. But
I haven't seen it yet. Should see it.
How about Barbie?
I should see that too. Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen them yet either. Okay, well, I'm happy to say that I'm a big fan of the new Eddie Campbell style.
Thank you. Excellent.
I just don't like waiting so long. Like, do you have a Patreon or anything like that? Or have you ever considered working in because your stuff is really well suited, I think, to serialization. Like, I would read every couple days or however long it takes. I'd read a new Eddie Campbell page and be pretty satisfied with it and be like wanting more. Have you ever thought about that or considered it?
No, I never have.
I know Ed Piskor is another guy I've interviewed here. He's making the move into a serialized. He's using Instagram to do a daily comic strip.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check that out.
And using that to help promote his other stuff and his other works too. I love because your little humor strips too. It's so great. Is that, I don't know, most people that use Photoshop and paste up and stuff it's because they can't draw, right? But
yes, that's true.
But you draw so well that it's a joy to see these two things come together. What did I want to ask you? So I want to ask you, what comics is Eddie Campbell waiting for and salivating over and reading, if any, these days? Like, what's the thing that you're into?
I'm out of touch.
Yeah, it's tough these days, man. It's really tough. It's tough to stay in touch if you want to. It's tough to stay in touch if you have a YouTube show dedicated to the art of comic books. It's tough. But I don't know, the way the book market is going and the comic book market especially, it's becoming harder and harder to find stuff like yours. But I'm assuming, and maybe this is totally wrong, Oh, by the way, Chris Staros, another guy who's been in your book, we've had him here and interviewed him and talked to him. How much of your stuff do you think is selling in these days in traditional bookstores compared to comic book stores? I'm guessing more to traditional bookstores now.
I don't know. I really don't know. I've no idea.
Is that something you wonder about, you're curious about, or you'd rather not know? You'd rather just be like putting out work and letting it go?
I don't really understand traditional bookstores' relationship with graphic novel. I don't. There's something missing there that I don't really get. It's like libraries. Libraries I do get. They like comics because it gets the kids in. So they like kids' comics.
Mm-hmm.
I see that with the libraries.
I mean, if you go to my local bookstore, all they have is art comics. Like Fantagraphics is dominates the shelf. There's not a lot of shelf space, but it's a cool, hip indie bookstore in a college town. So that's probably different than most people's scenario. But what I see when I go to if you go to a bookstore that's a serious independent bookstore and they have a graphic novel section, and right now, right there, you've already cut down the list quite a bit. But if they do, this is the kind of stuff that I see dominating their shelves, generally speaking. At least in the adult sections. Of course, now they put all the kids comics in the YA section and the kids section now, which I think is a good thing, right?
I don't know. I stopped paying attention a long time ago.
Well, that's the hot thing right now is the YA market for comics. There's so many of those graphic novelists putting out that stuff.
Yeah.
Tell us what this quote means, and this is a good note for us.
I stole that from somebody's tweet, but I've said underneath a quip that was going around. I tested positive for Schadenfreude.
Oh, there was one thing I wanted to ask you about. Wait a minute. Is this a typo?
No. That maybe that's just kind of an in joke with me. They way back in the 60s, Mad Magazine. I can't remember the writer. He was testing drug. He was testing LSD or something, and he was writing it as though he was actually in the throes of this
under
trip,
the influence,
the throes of this trip. But he writes some very interesting prose while he's there. But the last line in the whole piece, it's 2 pages, I think. But the last line in the whole piece was, "I can feel it wearing off now. Everything is back to normal."
Okay, great. This was bugging me because I'm like, there's no way this was a typo, but I didn't get the reference. I figured it had to be a reference, but I didn't understand it.
I thought it might stand on its own without being a reference. But
I sort of assumed it was not necessarily a reference, but just like that was it. Like it's not normal, but it is. It's an ironic line, but I was just, okay. What I did love is this was the last panel, and we get one last 2D photo collage with just a little subtle shadow. You don't know how much I pay attention to that part, Eddie, and how much I love that part of it.
So you may have noticed in this the 2 figures. You remember when they opened, they're walking in the snow.
Yes.
And then they're walking in springtime. Then they're walking in summer, and now they're walking in the fall. The 4 seasons have been. You see them walking through 4 seasons.
I loved it. It worked really well. It just reminds me, when I was a kid, there was a cartoon in the 70s. You might know it because I think it was Australian, Dot and the Kangaroo. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've seen it in passing, yeah.
Yeah, and they filmed everything and they did animation on top of real backgrounds. And it just, there is something about that combo of styles that just gives a certain something.
It was a 60s thing, wasn't it? I think the 60s was such an innovative period in so many ways. And what we've got now, we've got a kind of Puritanism now that says you can't use photos, you've got to draw it.
Huh.
In the past, there was a glorious
Yeah.
decade of. I remember reading a book. It was Marshall McLuhan was the man of the moment. But there was a book called "The Medium is the Massage."
Sure. Yeah.
And it was basically, it was like 160 pages of design and interesting typographical buffoonery, and it was a wonderful book. I thought the world was always going to be that interesting, and the world has become progressively more and more puritanical, and if you have an art, everybody wants to define that art. Define what it is, so that it can't wander into strange territory. Everybody wants it to. The graphic novel, comic. Everyone wants to define comics. What are comics? You get McCloudian definition, and it's fixed. It's fixed for all time. And Audrey is in art books, and you get the same definers in that arena. And how did it get this way? It seems to me there was a time when there was more promise in the world. Everything was going to be undefinable, but it's become. Let me tell you, son, the world was more.
I see some hope in certain things. I haven't seen it yet, the latest Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, but I did see the first one. And I thought they're doing some way wacky stuff with bringing in different styles and mixing medias, mixing even film and animation and different styles of animation together.
Yeah.
And it was such a mega hit that it gives me hope that people have sort of gotten bored with the like Pixar 3D. They look like plastic toys kind of animation that is kind of the generic 3D style that's out there. So I see some hope. One last topic before I let you go, Eddie. This is why a little out of left field for you. What do you think about the current strikes going on in Hollywood, the writer strike and the Actors Guild strike? Any thoughts on that you want to care to share?
No, it's a great thing, and I hope they get what they want. I hope they get what they're after. They deserve better. Too much of the money is all ending up down one end. It's like, you know, when you quilt, when your big heavy, you know, your filled in quilt in the bed is too heavy, and you shake everything down the other end and just flat to sleep under. All the money's gone down one end, and there's nothing up the other end for all the people. So yeah.
Great. I'm in full agreement. I support it 100%. I'm canceling all my streaming network subscriptions until this thing's settled, because frankly it's absurd. There's such a disparity, and it already happened in the music industry. The accountants and the technologists figured out how to suck all of the profit out of it and completely cut off, the creators. And I just feel like we're in this time now where people can do their own thing. Rick Veitch is putting out his own comics. Eddie Campbell, if you wanted to, tomorrow, you could open a Patreon and be self-publishing. If that's what you wanted to do, you could. So I feel that's the brave new world that we're all in. What do you ever consider going back to self-publishing? I mean, you started there, right?
I tried something recently. I published 50 copies of a book last month.
Boing.
I don't have one handy, but it was just something to take to conventions. I don't want people sending me money, because then I'm going to have to deal with it. I'm going to have to behave like a publisher.
Oh, you're right. Well, even better. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I don't want to send you any money. I just want you to send your comic into me, to the $1 Million Mailbox, so we can check it out and show it to the people and show them what they're missing.
But I did try this print on demand, and
What's the verdict?
I don't have it. It'd take too long to get my hand on it. I could disappear for a couple of minutes and get my hand on it.
Well, I would just give me a nutshell. Like, how do you feel about the process? Do you think it's something you're going to keep doing? That's what I care the most about.
It was, I don't know. Now that I've figured out I was giving them something that was a bit too complicated. It was a bit too difficult. I wanted too many copies. If I'd given them something stupid and simple,
yes,
they would have done it quicker.
Yeah. I
wanted a 100-page book, perfect bound at the side, and I wanted 200 copies. And I think they kept putting it to the back of the pile. Oh, this is too difficult.
Black and white or color?
Black and white.
Oh, you got to look at the Amazon. You got to look at what Rick Veitch is doing. You're describing exactly the type of book that he's putting out right now. You should look at his Maxi Mortal, his new Maxi Mortal, and his latest Rare Bit Fiends. Come on, Eddie C, go give Rick a couple shekels and go check them out. I think the comics are great, so you're not going to be disappointed by that. But it's the format that I think you'll look at it and maybe think, hey, this could be it.
I'll have a look. Cool. Meanwhile, if you want my other book, look for me at SPX or something.
Oh, okay.
I've got 20 of them left. I've printed 50. I think I've got 20 left. I'll take them to SPX with the idea that I'll print more when I need them. Because there's no point in ordering 200. They've given them a big job and they keep trying to evolve. I'll put it to the back, And I nearly missed having it in time for Cake. I had it at Cake in Chicago. It's a reprint of an old.
Well, that's their benefit, though, of the print on demand thing. The way Veitch does, he doesn't have to print any copies. Like, they print it when I buy it. When I order it, they print one and they send it to me. It's pretty cool that way. Yeah, it's really a neat thing. It's all through Amazon, I believe. So definitely worth your time to check out, I think.
I'm not sure I like something wrong.
I mean, no print runs. You don't get you don't get the limited quantity. There's not going to be a kangaroo skin edition of one of these books, I'm pretty sure, but you never know.
I'll have to look into it. I'll take it.
Eddie Campbell.
Take it on advisement.
All right. Eddie Campbell, thank you so much for your generous time you spent looking at this book today. I hope everyone goes out and get it. I hope my real copy arrives soon because I don't like reading comics digitally. Although I will say yours read very well on a tablet.
I do like reading them digitally because you can zoom in. But
I like that.
Too many of the ones that where they're selling the download, you can't really get very close. You can't zoom in. I'd like it to be print quality so I could zoom in.
I agree.
But I was reading somewhere that you'd only be able to get 5 books on your.
Yeah.
Whatever. I just want to look. I do a lot of reading on my laptop, and I like to be able to zoom in on a thing.
I just find paper is a superior technology for reading. Like, that's how I honestly look at it. It's like the tech, there are trade-offs, but overall as an experience, make mine paper forever.
I don't know. My eyes are getting old.
The zooming, that is the one thing I'll give you. Or that is one of the trade-offs for sure on the digital column. But still, just the idea that, okay, 100 years from now, Eddie, you put out a PDF today or a digital comic, God forbid, some proprietary format of a digital comic, and then you put out a paper copy of your book. Which one will be available in 100 years to read? The paper.
True. This is true.
Yeah. Okay. I want to thank you for your time, Eddie. Anything that you want to direct the folks to before we get out of here?
No, just go and buy my new book.
Go buy it, man. It's in stores now, right? It has shipped.
It's out
and is in store.
It was out in July. It's been out for a month. The second death of Eddie Campbell by Eddie Campbell.
Check it out.
That's the whole title.
Okay, check it out today. I'm going to play the closing credits, and then we're out of here. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you all next time.